Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us for our September webinar, Using Personal Networks to Prepare for College. I'm so excited to welcome a representative from Peak Parent Center, Sammy Peterson, to share all of her wonderful wisdom today about personal networks. Before we get there, I want to just give a really brief overview of inclusive higher education. It's going to be fast so that we can save as much of the hour for Sammy as possible. With that, if you want to see any of this information in more detail, feel free to check out any of our other webinars. We cover this in detail in pretty much every webinar. But for this time, I do want to make sure that Sammy can have her full hour. So with that, thank you so much for joining us. I just want to remind you that we do webinars every single month. You can access and register our webinars for October, November, and December at this link here. This will be an incredibly discussion-based presentation. There will be lots of time for Q&A and thoughts and all kinds of things, so you can expect that over the next hour. As always, we will have a brief feedback survey immediately following this Zoom call, so please fill that out if you would. And then just one more reminder that this will be recorded. I want to give a really, again, very brief rundown of IN. We are a nonprofit that works to create and support inclusive college opportunities, specifically for students with intellectual disability who need specific support in academic growth, social development, career advancement, and independence. As a nonprofit, we do not provide direct services on campus. We have these four main focuses: education, outreach, expansion, and outcomes. But it is the staff on campuses who are providing services to students. With that, this is our staff. As I already mentioned, my name is Elise Kramer. I am our program coordinator. My contact information is down there at the bottom. Feel free to reach out whenever you need absolutely anything at all. I love working with parents, students, teachers, disability professionals. So whoever you are, if I can help you, I would love to. All right. Again, this is going to be a all too quick rundown of inclusive higher education, but just so we're kind of on the same page about it. Inclusive higher education is a form of college support specifically for students with intellectual disability. Because it is specific to that population of students, there isn't an alternative admission pathway. That pathway does not require a traditional diploma. Certainly plenty of students apply and are admitted with certificates of completion from their K-12 school system. Lots of students have had EEOs, so all of those things are perfectly okay for inclusive higher ed. Students take courses that are fully inclusive, fully normative, with all the other peers on their campus. The main difference being that students in inclusive higher ed basically only take courses that align with their career goal and daily life skills. And so there's not a lot of, quote unquote, gen ed courses that students need to get through. They typically take 9 credits a semester, so much fewer, and they are all very targeted and intentional. Students do receive both accommodations and modifications. That is the key difference between inclusive higher education and other forms of support for students with disabilities, that students in IHE do receive modifications. As a result of that, they receive a certificate credential rather than a degree credential. Students cannot receive a degree with a modified transcript. So that's something to keep in mind. All along the way, students participate in career readiness with a career kind of trajectory to get them from general jobs and internships to experience in their chosen field. They can choose to live on campus at some campuses, and they receive staff as well as peer mentor support in 4 main domains of academic, social development, career development, as well as independence. Again, I'm going to skip kind of right through this so I can save time for Sammy. I go over this in more detail in many, many other webinars. All right, with that, there are currently 6 schools offering inclusive higher ed services in Colorado, soon to be 8. One of them is the Office of Inclusive Services at UCCS. They do allow students to live on campus in apartments, should they so choose to live on campus. That is a 4-year program, and it is now the second in the nation to receive inclusive post-secondary accreditation. So that's really, really exciting. Elevate at Arapahoe Community College serves students at both of their commuter campuses in Littleton and Castle Rock. That tends to be a 3-year opportunity for students. The Regis Global Inclusive program is in Denver. Students can choose to live in dorms there. They have a 1-year track, or more commonly, students will take the 2 or 3-year track. That is more of a liberal arts focused program. And then UNC, the Go On and Learn opportunity in Greeley, is 4 years, and students can choose to live in dorms if they want to live on campus. And then just briefly, all of these schools have received CTP status, which basically means that families and students are eligible for federal financial aid. Again, reminder that students do not receive a degree if they go through these programs because of that modified credential. They will walk out with a certificate, which is still an incredibly meaningful outcome. Just know that if your student could be a degree-seeking student, they may want to go that path. And then we always get asked, when do admissions open? Well, they typically open at the end of first semester or beginning of second semester for the following August. We will keep you up to date on those dates on our website and social media, so please follow along if you have not. All right, and then we are so excited this school year to welcome the CSU Rams Scholars Opportunity officially into our consortium. These are this program is specifically for students who are interested in agricultural trades and more hands-on experiential learning kind of classes. This is a 4-year program. They ideally will eventually offer on-campus living, but not quite yet while they're kind of getting their feet still under them. And then we are also really excited to welcome on the Inclusive Higher Education Solutions opportunity at MSU Denver. That's a commuter campus, will remain that way. Students will attend both of these programs for 4 years, and this is their first school year for both of these programs that they're officially launched. And the next school year, we will be welcoming in both Lamar Community College and Pikes Peak State College. We're really excited about that. Stay tuned for more info as we have it. They're still kind of in their planning year. All 4 of these programs will eventually receive CTP status. It is a process, so they haven't done that yet, but they certainly will receive that. And then just another reminder that all of these students will receive that comprehensive higher education certificate as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sammy. Thanks so much, Sammy.
So thank you so much for having me join you guys tonight for this webinar. I'm here. My name is Sammy Peterson. I am the Personal Networks Project Coordinator for Peak Parent Center down in Colorado Springs, and I'm anxious to talk to you about how personal networks can be used as a tool, one tool of many, to help young adults and parents transition or prepare for transitioning out of high school and into college. A little bit about Peak Parent Center. If you haven't contacted our office already, we are a nonprofit organization. Like I said, down in Colorado Springs, we've been in existence since 1986. We're federally funded to be a parent training and information center and a technical assistance center for other parent centers in the western part of the United States. And then we also have a special project called Project Power that's funded by the Rehabilitation Services Administration that we're working with a cohort of young adults to advise parent centers on how to make their services more accessible to young adults. So I've been with Peak Parent Center off and on for the last 27 years, and I love what I'm doing now with this project. But a lot of times people don't know what a personal network is when we say that. And so I really love this definition, how it talks about the fact that it's people who are personally interested in and intentionally invited to lend their minds and energy towards creating a safe and secure future for a person who has a disability. We sometimes refer to that young adult as a center person. And we really focus on seeing their gifts, the way they contribute, and what they're interested in doing next in the community at large, not just in special places with special people doing special things. I've lived experience with this, and that I am the parent of a young man who's 30 and has a disability label, and it really has made the difference in his life between, living on his couch or in day programs and having an active contributing life, that he's doing things that are meaningful to him in his day-to-day life and passing on his gifts to the community around him. There's 3 core values of personal networks, and the first one is that it's person-centered. A lot of times when we say that, it's kind of like a lingo or a jargon that everybody's like, yeah, I know what person-centered is. And the same kind of goes for the word strengths-based as well as community-based. And so we're going to spend a little time tonight going over what we mean by those words and what that looks like. So I have a video to start us out with.
From the origin of person-centered planning, we were trying to understand and see what it looks like when we just fit people into systems and defined their needs and saw them through the eyes of what a system needs for a person to be in order to generate the funding that's required and to basically service them. And system-centered work tends to be based on a medical model, which assumes something's wrong with people, and it's the system's job to fix them. And so the system is invested in defining them in terms of their deficiencies and creating a treatment plan, and then working to help people get it right before they get to be members and be whole people in the real world. So person-centered planning offers a major contrast to that, which is to say that people don't belong to systems. They belong to themselves, they belong to their families and their communities. And if we see them in a different light by the capacities that they bring, and we understand that their communities are the place where they can contribute and be citizens, then our thinking shifts dramatically from how to fit people into systems and service them there to how do we support people to live good lives in community, and then how do we take what we need from systems and services so that services are not bad, they just tend to be wired for their own purposes, for their own self-interest. So a good person-centered planning process calls into question the way we use services and invites us to really change the way most of our services are configured to be more responsive to the people and the way that they want to live in the communities that they're in.
Contact us for more information for a free.
So, did anything strike you as you listened to that video, Corey, or is it?
Yeah, there's no
Elise or
way
else?
there's no way to say that our current thinking is in line with what I just heard. It seems like most people have the systems or institutions, and because those are in place and there's such a huge, I guess, momentum and history with that it seems difficult for people to retool how they approach education that is like this. Now, I heard what is said, and that's great. And if more people can think like that, it helps, I think, others with a non-standard path. And so my question is, how is that possible?
Right.
And maybe that's what we're going to talk about.
That is what we're going to talk about. Yes, but you see the value of that person-centered planning. And I agree with you wholeheartedly that it's easier to just go ahead and jump into that path and go with what's being offered versus trying to create something new that's countercultural and maybe kind of swimming upstream. So
Yeah, no doubt.
yeah. So,
Okay.
so just being aware of this perspective and like, am I agreeing to, or are we stepping further into the stream of system-centered planning? What kind of actions are we taking to keep this person centered about how is my child being heard or listened to is really, towards person-centered planning. The next component that we need to look at then is, what I was talking about. What is our focus? Okay. Do we see the person, or are we just looking to take care of the diagnosis, take care of the label and make sure people under gifts? Or are we only focusing on deficits and needs and where they're not meeting the benchmark? Do you gather folklore from people who know the centered person well? Or are we depending primarily on professionals to make recommendations and suggestions and tell us what our capacities are in their written reports? So these are some things to look at as you're walking through your process of planning what the future holds and planning for your transitions as you move forward. So, and you'll have a copy of the slides, is that right? That we can send the slides to them if they want? Yes?
Yes, I will be sending out the slides with this recording as well, so people can watch the video, all that kind of stuff as well.
All right, good. So again, we have to kind of go back to the basics and look at what are the 5 key elements of life that kind of determine whether or not we're building or living a good life. And John and Connie O'Brien identified these 5 core elements as pathways to a good life. But we have a sense of belonging, meaning that we have friends and acquaintances and people that are in positive relationships with us, that we're recognized and respected as being somebody, that we're in places that are appropriate for our age. Similar to what other people our age are doing, instead of only in those special places with special people doing special things. And are we making contributions in our homes and in the place? And do we make choices around what we're going to do next? So again, it's really looking at some of these elemental values before we start the process of moving towards what we're looking for. Some ways to identify what those element values are in our lives as we're planning. As you guys are going into your transition IEP meetings, you can print out these elements and take them in to those meetings and put this down on the table and say, these things are important to us and we'd like to use these as a benchmark or filter for whatever we're discussing that we're going to do next. When we're planning what's going to happen next, is it deepening my child's friendships and relationships? Is my child increasing their presence in the local community by participating in what we're suggesting here, or what we're saying the next step is in their life? Is my child in control and making choices? Or is the system driving it? Am I driving it? How much am I allowing my child to make choices here? And I was speaking earlier before the call started, I've learned from a mentor along the way that we never want to ask parents to let go of our child's life, but we do want to encourage and support holding the responsibility of being their parent in a different way. So we learn how to hold it differently, and we really move to that guide on the side position instead of the leader that's kind of cutting the way or creating the path before them. So, and that's a really hard transition to make for us as parents, but it's a really critical one for their future and their independence, especially after we're gone. So by starting now while we're here, we can support that transition happening better in their life after we're gone. How are we enhancing their reputation? How do people see them if we pursue this course of action, if we enroll in this project, or if she starts or he starts doing this activity? And what way are they contributing to their local community? And then is this allowing opportunities to continue to develop competencies? Or are we saying that, yeah, learning isn't important anymore, we're just trying to survive and hold on? And again, these were developed by Beth Mount. So another important consideration that we have to hold at the same time is the way that society looks at what we value as a whole. So as a whole, we value people who are intelligent, who are seen as intelligent, beautiful, wealthy, educated, young, and having great possessions and material wealth. And unfortunately, when you think of a person with a disability, a lot of times the values that come to the surface are that that person is incompetent, that they're imperfect, they're relegated to a life of poverty because of their income limits. They're typically uneducated, as they can't go further than high school frequently. And as they get older, it's not cute, it's not funny, it's not adorable anymore. And rarely do they have possessions and material wealth. This is called social role valorization. It was developed by Wolfenberger back in late 60s, early 70s. So again, Corey, what do we do? These are horrible things, right? Because it leads to a loss of control and choice. It leads to lost opportunities for individualizations, where our kids are tracked, or they're told that they have to go to this program because that's where the supports are. They're subjected to mass management. And then most importantly, I think this is the most potent experience that impacts their lives, is they have impoverished experiences that lead to more devaluation. So a lot of times, if we do take the time to say, what do you want to do? They don't know, because they've never had the opportunity to explore or discover that for themselves. So none of this is meant to be about a downer or a bummer for you. Here is the tool that you can start using to get past this. And what we really want to do is we want to look at the giftedness of the young adult. And this is a really beautiful way of exploring that, instead of sitting down and say, well, what are you good at? Or being in a meeting where people say, well, Corey just, his smile lights up the room. I've never seen that as a job description requirement, is that your smile lights up the room, or that you're such a positive person. I mean, sometimes that's listed, but a lot of times, a lot of the positive things that we were told in IEPs were a lot of platitudes and just weren't very, very genuine. So I love this because it really pulls it down into the concrete, hard, tangible things that we can look at. And so it was the Plan Institute up in Canada that came up with this way of evaluating giftedness. And what we want to do is start looking at, what are they gifted at around their head? So what do they know a lot about? What do they like to ask about? What can they talk about incessantly sometimes? What are they very knowledgeable about? And we don't have to categorize or value that knowledge. It might be that they know the Lego set numbers for all of the Batman characters, or it could be that they have an incredible understanding of, the moth species, and they can name the genus and family and all those other things that I can't do, right? We also want to look at their gifts of the heart. So what are they passionate about? What do we really care about? What moves us? What motivates us? What do we find that makes us want to get up and go out of bed? A lot of times, our society looks at what we can do. And so these first two are kind of the head knowledge may be a do thing as well, because it's measuring that intelligence in a certain sense, right? And then hands can be what you're making, you're actually able to accomplish with your hands. And those are gifts that we call the gifts of doing. But when we start looking at the heart and the history, we can start looking at the gifts of presence. So what kind of gift of presence does your child bring? What kind of gift of presence do you bring when you go into a room? So instead of what you can build with your hands and create, it's okay for you to list that. But if that's the only aspect of you that we're looking at, you may end up being devalued in the long run. And then we also want to look at the history of your life. So we had a young lady that was enrolled in our project 2 years ago who had a history of adoption. And so that was something that was very much tied to her heart. She was very passionate about that. And it was important for her to recognize that that was a part of her story going forward. And so it was really important for her to be involved with something around people who were experiencing or had experienced being adopted or being in the foster care system. So we can start to kind of list these things out in those 4 categories. And it's amazing to see how gifted your child is, and you start to see things from a different perspective. My son loves food, right? He loves to eat. And so it has led to us understanding that he is a foodie. He really loves food. And that's kind of identified a course of employment for him to pursue. So why is it important for us to know gifts? Well, it kind of starts with this circle of support. So this was developed by a woman by the name of Judith Snow. Back again in the 70s, she was a woman that was living in a nursing home and had the use of one of her thumbs. And she ended up using this diagram with along with knowing what her gifts were and a circle of support to allow her to eventually move to speaking internationally about how to live independently. And so what you do is you start with your child's name or your name in the center here of this circle. And this first circle is called the circle of intimacy. And these are meaningful relationships, people that are intimately involved in your life. And you put a dot on that circle, and then next to that dot, you write the name of the person that's a part of their life. And so a lot of times we'll see mom and dad, sometimes siblings, maybe grandparents, aunts and uncles. It just kind of depends on the culture of your family who was in that circle. But the thing that as a parent, when we look at that circle for our child, we know that 2 of these dots are going to go away, right? And that's where my motivation comes, because I want to make sure there's other people that'll step into that role when I'm gone. The next yellow circle is called the circle of friendship. And again, this is, a dot for every person that you would consider to be a friend. And there can be variations of friendship there. It's important to recognize those variations. Sometimes it's an acquaintance, and sometimes it's a best friend. So you want to go ahead and note that next to the person that you're writing down there. But more importantly, you don't want to write down anybody who's paid to be in your life. And I'll circle back to that in just a minute. The next circle is called the circle of participation. These are the places that you go regularly. They can be formal and informal. So if you regularly go to the dog park down at the end of the block, you can put the dog park down there. If you regularly go to a gym, then you'll put the gym on there. But you also want to write down the people that are in that place. So Tom at the dog park who has the husky, and Mary at the gym who likes to lift weights with you. This last circle is called the circle of exchange. And these are people who are paid to provide a service in your life. And a lot of times what Judith Snow found is that when you have a person with a disability in the center, they have anywhere from 15 to 25 people on that circle of exchange. And they're lucky if they have 1 or 2 places and 1 or 2 people on their circle of participation and friendship. And like I said earlier, we know that that circle of intimacy is going to change dramatically when mom and dad die. The important thing is which circle is most important. And so when I was asked that question, I was in a room full of parents, and we all yelled out, well, circle of intimacy, because we want to make sure someone's there for our child. And the speaker circled back and said, actually, it's the circle of participation. And so this is one of those ways that as you're transitioning to going out of high school, and you're starting to look at what life is going to look like afterwards, you want to start taking note of those places that you're participating, because it's by going to the places that we love to go, because they're based on the strengths that we have and the interests that we have and the fascinations that we have and our giftedness, that we meet people who have those same interests, fascinations, and strengths, and they become our friends. So they start to see us as an artist instead of a person with a disability who likes art. They start to see us as a foodie instead of a person with a disability who likes to eat, right? They start to see us in terms of our capacity instead of in terms of our deficits. And it's there then that they can talk to you about the pastels and which pastel brand you're using. They can comfortably talk to you about that, but they may not know how to talk to you about your seizures or your feeding tube or the wheelchair that you're using. So by going to the places that you love to go based on those strengths and gifts and interests, you meet people who become your friend, and those people can then move into that circle of intimacy. When I first heard about this, they asked us, where did you meet your most significant person or your best friend in your life? And 75% of the room said work and school. So as we know, people with disabilities have an unemployment rate of 85%. And rarely can we go on to college, but that's why N is such an incredibly progressive and hugely potentially dynamic influencer on the paradigm of the future of our children's lives, is because they're providing a pathway for children to get into college programs and discover and explore ways that they can pursue secondary education or internships or other ways of being employed, as well as the Colorado Office of Employment First. Those are two great organizations that are helping our kids develop that circle of participation in employment and in education. So a lot of times I like to circle back and say, when we were going through the pandemic, the world got a chance to taste what it's like to live with a disability, because we couldn't go to the places we wanted to go. We couldn't be with the people that we wanted to be with. We couldn't work and we couldn't go to school, right? And we all hated it. So there's motivation for us to start looking at how are we helping individuals get out of their own personal pandemics by creating opportunities for them to participate in the community at large in the ways that they want to, with the people that they want to be with, when they want to be there. And so by, again, identifying those strengths that your child has or that you have as a young adult, what you're fascinated about and things that you love doing, and then asking the question, where do other people, other artists go in my community? Then you can start to develop this circle of participation. So in our community, they shop at Jerry's Art-A-Rama. They go to the Art Walk on the first Friday of the month. They know the coffee shops that post the artwork of local artists. And they also take continuing education classes at the university in art classes. But by going to those other places throughout the month and throughout the year, they're going to start meeting other artists who want to get to know them, and we'll recognize them when they enroll in that class, and it will create opportunities for them to develop those relationships that can then articulate into that circle of intimacy. Corey, does that make some sense to you there?
Yeah, it's actually a good analysis of something that I think a lot of parents in the position I'm in need to start thinking about. So
Yeah.
you kind of put it down well.
Yeah. So this is a concrete tool that we can use to map that out. You can draw 4 circles on a piece of paper and start doing this, right? Just map it out right now, or sit down and have a conversation over dinner. Who are these people? Where are these places? You know, another question I love to ask people who don't have a disability label is just take a moment and think, and this is a great question to ask at an IEP to some of the teachers, you know, who are the people that are paid to be in your life? Well, I have a hairdresser, you know, I have a chiropractor, I have my, you know, physician, I have a dentist, and, you know, I have a person that comes and mows the lawn, right? And then ask them to imagine what life would look like if they were only friends with those people. Because those people are out here on this circle of exchange. And when those people go away, they lose their best friend. And then they start to see why it's important to look at this circle of participation from a strengths-based perspective, instead of looking at programs and services that we can refer to and get people enrolled in and signed up for. So just to kind of summarize it, our gifts and interests and strengths lead to roles and identities for our young adults, which then lead to places in the community that they can participate, which then results in relationships and friendships. So it's all interconnected, and that's the way that you and I develop relationships. So why is it that our kids with disabilities can't do this too? So I'm gonna just kind of wrap things up here. We'll open it up for questions, but identify some next steps that you can take to implement these core values and practices in your role tomorrow. If you're a parent, what can you do next to start practicing some of what you've learned tonight, or as a result of watching this video? Can you make a list of, the 4 H's, head, hand, heart, history, and start? It's a dynamic list that changes over time, but just start tracking that over the next month. What are my child's gifts in these 4 areas of their life? Can you get a big piece of poster board and draw 4 circles and get some sticky notes and start writing down names of people and putting them on those circles, so you can start to see where the gaps are and where you're spending the majority of your time. When you're sitting in at your IEP meeting and you're holding those 5 elements as a part of the meeting, are you asking those questions and asking the team to really evaluate things from that perspective, and bringing in your poster board with your circles on it to the meeting so that you can show them what your life looks like? And you're also sharing that 4H gifts sheet so that everybody gets to know who you really are, instead of you're a great person that has a smile that lightens up the room. They really get to know who you are. So I'm available through Peak Parent Center. You can call this number and they can get you in touch with me. Like I said, I lead the Personal Networks project. We just finished our cohort for this year. We're waiting to hear about continued funding for next year. And what we will be doing starting sometime February, March, we haven't exactly got the date nailed down, is we will be launching this project on through an online platform, and hang on, and then you'll be able to enroll and be a part of an ongoing cohort that you can enroll throughout the year. So it'll be on demand. What we're doing is we're structuring it where it's a 15-minute webinar to get you thinking about some different things. And it's going to be 10 different modules that you'll work your way through going forward. So I can take questions now if you like.
Sammy, thank you. I think for me, one of the questions I get a lot from parents, but also from teachers and other people who are in the personal networks of students, but particularly from parents. I often kind of hear from parents, how can I let my kid move 2 hours away to go to college? I play accountant, chef, every single role in my kid's life. I don't know that I can trust them to be independent, or, right? The story,
right.
They kind of follow patterns, but they're different for every family. Right. And so one thing that I really encourage families to think about is, who can you tap on in your kid's life to start playing some of these other roles, just so that they can get used to relying on other people, or in many cases, getting used to relying on themselves and really kind of becoming more independent and interdependent with their communities of support, whatever that looks like. That way, when they get to a new college campus, or even if they're living at home and commuting every day, but they're interacting with all these new people, now they know how to do that. And that's so powerful.
Right. One of the other documents that we do in our course is we help people identify the roles that they're carrying. And so, your young adult, are they their own personal chef, or are you their personal chef? exactly what you said. Who supports them with managing finances? Who is their timekeeper? I mean, sometimes we have, we play that role of being a timekeeper, keeping them aware of what time it is and how close it is to needing to leave. We also can have roles like a fashion advisor, right? Or we can have roles such as, a social skills coach, a lot of different roles that we as parents can carry. And so one of the activities that we do is we have everybody map out the roles that they're carrying. And once you start to see that you are a short order chef and you're also a taxi provider, a medical advisor, a financial advisor, all the roles that you carry, then you can make an informed decision on how you want to either outsource or delegate a portion or all of those responsibilities and who you want to do that with. Okay. And the young adult should be the one who says, yeah, I want to work with Millie on managing my money because she's an accountant. Yeah, she's your age and she's your friend, but I'm comfortable with talking to her about that. Or yeah, I can talk to Sam about, the number of video games that I'm buying every month and whether or not that's going to work with my budget for me to do that. Or yeah, I can meet with Lizzie and talk to her about meal planning and grocery shopping and what I should be buying at the grocery store and actually going to the grocery store and buying groceries together. So there's a lot of different ways, but you have to, I think what it is that we have to make time to stop and consciously identify those roles that we're carrying so that we can make an informed choice of who we're going to transfer them out to. And the benefit of doing that now is that we're available to download all the information, the 20 years of learning that we've had, or the 30, whatever it may be, years of learning that we've experienced and we've learned the hard way. We're available to share that information now with somebody who's interested in taking over that role. And it's not that they're taking over everything. They're not taking over Medicaid eligibility, financial management, meal planning, seizure management, medication, all of those things. You can piece it out to a team that then is around you as you move forward. And what this does is it allows your young adult to grieve the loss of their parent instead of having to deal with that and all these new people that are now a part of their lives overnight that they don't know from Adam. If we can start doing that now, then we can start transitioning them into those relationships early on. And all of those roles come with the agreement that if this ever becomes too much for you, that's fine. You know what we're looking for, and you get to pick the next person that assumes these responsibilities. So it really works beautifully going forward. And what's neat is that network starts to, they start getting to know each other as well. And it becomes a very dynamic, life-giving process. It's not an imposition to ask people to be a part of a network. A lot of times people who love you well are wanting to know how they can step in and what they can do that would be meaningful and helpful. And they just don't know how. So by sharing your journey with in an intentional way with people from a positive perspective, you're not inviting people in like, oh, this is so hard and I have so much I have to do and I need help. You're not doing that. You're saying, hey, this is what we love about Will. This is what he's really great at. This is what he's wanting to do next. And, Corey, I know that you love rattlesnakes too. What could we do together around rattlesnakes? So, and that's the way it works going forward. So any other thoughts or questions?
So I think Elise hit the nail on the head. That's probably the biggest question that most people in a similar circumstance would have, as myself. And I guess I'd take a step back and look at, for individuals that are used to the system of supports in school and education, and that includes additional help along the lines of maybe it's an IEP or others just watching out for them.
Right.
I am now in a in a mindset where I have been relying upon some of the IEP additional stuff, accommodations, etc., and knowing that the next step won't have near that kind of system.
Right.
And so I almost find myself rethinking some of the expectations of what an IEP, and almost saying, you know, today, for my daughter, less help is better for her because the next phase will have less help.
Right.
And so just something to think about, right? And so I like Elise's questions, because that's right where I find myself. Appreciate
Right.
your answer and your thoughts on it.
Yeah.
So thanks.
And
And I think your bullet target was kind of right on. So
yeah. So as Beth said at the beginning in that video, systems are not bad, right? And I guess this is where I need to circle back and talk about those friendships, right? We're not saying that people who are paid to be in your young adult's life can't be friends. They can be, but you need to have a define the relationship conversation, right? Like, what's going to happen when funding runs out? Is this something that you want to stay around for or not? And so as you look at supports that are going to be phasing out because she's aging out, or insurance is running out, or that provider is pregnant or getting married or moving away, yeah, those are great questions to start to have and say, what is this going to look like going forward? It doesn't necessarily mean that those supports don't have to be there. It may be that we need to discover new ways that those supports are taking place. So if it's not going to happen the way that it's been happening, what is the plan for how it can happen when she's graduated? What would that look like? Who are the places and the people that we need to be connected with? And if systems can't pick up the slack on that piece, and actually you shouldn't start with systems first. I mean, we really, want to encourage you to look at those personal relationships first. If there isn't somebody in their life that can help to pick up that piece, if it's just purely, if it's not something that needs medical certification or different things like that. I mean, even if it has medical certification, there might be somebody who can get medically certified to do it. But let's start with the people she already knows and then build on that going forward. But if it's, some kind of specialized training intervention that she's getting, and you're afraid that that won't be there after high school, then what are some different ways that we can accomplish that goal with different people and different resources, and start asking that question now in the IEP? Or what are some benchmarks, like you said, that we need to start working on now so that she's comfortable when that's totally phased out, right? Because it's a both and you don't really know which way it's going to go until you start down the path. So you kind of have to pursue both paths while you're moving towards that more independent living kind of style, right? And just another note too, I mean, none of us live completely independent, right? We all live interdependently. We all have people that we reach out to for help. We all have advisors that we seek out advice from about our lives. So we're not looking for 100% independence for our children. We're just looking for what is that interdependence going to look like, and defining it a little. We have to be more intentional. We get to be more intentional around that moving forward. So a lot of parents don't have any say in this in their life, in their children's lives. We're fortunate because we do have a lot of say in it, in that process. It's not always seen as a gift, and I don't always experience it as a gift. But I do try to remind myself, this is a privilege and it's an honor to be a part of this process in partnership with him and with her.
And Sammy, I want to add to that briefly. In speaking recently with a dad of one of our recent graduates, he was kind of reflecting on his son's growth throughout college. And he made a comment along the lines of, when I was 22, I didn't really want to hang out with my parents. And so when it makes sense that when my son graduated high school, he wanted to go to college because he knew that he wouldn't always want to hang out with his parents.
Right.
And so he kind of made the point that his son kind of got to that point as well, right? And so some of, our jobs as the people in those personal networks is to help that center person expand their own personal networks for their own interest or personal good, or whatever that outlook might
Right.
be. Sometimes it is just a matter of one day I'll die, but it also is a matter of the center person also wants to have an enriching life, and it's part of our role to help make that happen in whatever way is feasible.
Right. And sometimes it just doesn't happen as automatically for them.
Mhm.
Because of their disability and the assumptions and those perceptions from society that assume they can't. So by being intentional around creating communities of support, what happens is people start to see capacity that's there. Oh, I didn't know she understood that. Oh, I didn't know she could do that. Oh, I didn't know he could do that. Oh, he can do that. Oh, he understands that. And and then everybody it grows and is transformed. Yeah. So, any
Thank you
other,
again, Sammy.
thoughts or questions around this? I'm trying to think of some of the pushback that I get sometimes as we start into this. So, but I think Corey's kind of hit a lot of them right on the head. So,
Yeah, no, I think we're of similar mindset, so I appreciate it.
yeah. Again, I think the only other piece that I, sometimes frequently hear is that we don't have anywhere we're going and we don't have any friends. But then when you sit down with that document and you start to go over it, you start to see you do actually have friends and you do actually have places that you're going. You just you didn't recognize them because you're so busy doing that you haven't had a chance to stop and look. So, and that circle is a great tool to use for yourself as a father. What are your circles of support? What are mom's circles of support? What are siblings' circles of support? Right? And then see how the circles intersect with each other. My son and my best friend Millie is on his circle because she's known him all of his life, right? She wouldn't be the first person that he calls, right? But she is a support person for him, right? So he does feel safe with her, and he does recognize her as a support person for him. So, and when you're feeling stressed, take a moment to pull the circles out and evaluate, where am I spending my time right now? Oh, it's all out there in that circle of exchange. No wonder I'm feeling so empty and frustrated and stressed out and tired, right? Because there's more than just financial cost associated with that circle. So we can map things out in a healthy way then and make some decisions around, where do I want to be spending my time? And what are the messages that I'm getting right now about myself as far as my own giftedness? Is that impacting where I'm spending my time?
I love it. Thank you so much, Sammy. This was so powerful.
Okay.
I want to briefly end by just kind of going back to, if I can get my screen to share, I want to just kind of go back to this model of inclusive higher education specifically, and how this really does interrelate to the personal networks, because this is paramount. A lot of what Sammy said is kind of in the bones of inclusive higher ed. So right there in independence, one of those, that second bullet point is person-centered planning. And a lot of our schools have even moved into a model of person-driven planning, where it's not just that we're gonna, put that center person in the center, but we're really gonna let them drive the car and figure out, what do you want out of your college experience and how can we make that happen? And yes, we're gonna be here to support you, right? As you see, there's this big black circle kind of connecting the whole model. But ultimately it's about you and what you want out of your time on campus and for the rest of your life, right? As well as for academics. A lot of what Sammy said really does kind of intersect in that academic model, where they have paid peer mentors who go to their classes with them and also into their, clubs and social lives with them. Sometimes those do kind of bleed into genuine friendships. Sometimes the peer mentor just kind of says, hey, I'll go with you to the first club meeting. And then once you get there, you'll kind of make your own friends who are interested in that club, even if I'm not necessarily, right? And so a lot of what Sammy shared in those circles, the first time I heard this presentation, I just could not help but making these interconnections. And
oh my gosh, this is so powerful always, but particularly in the context of how do we support students with disabilities at the college level, where, as Corey alluded to, there is not the support that there is necessarily, there might be, but a lot of those IEP supports kind of go away. And so then what? Or maybe they stay, but they morph, they look a lot different. And so how can we not only prepare our students for those changes, but also help kind of support the process when things do look different, right? And in 5 years, when you're not in college anymore, they're going to look even more different, right? And so just kind of working with the center person, in our case, the student, on getting used to their own circles of support changing and personal networks changing. And sometimes that's sad, and we have to grieve the loss of a friendship or a family member. And sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes it means we're growing and changing and going on to new and exciting things in our lives and new careers, right? And so in a lot of ways, I really just kind of wanted to, end by hammering into the similarities with inclusive higher ed specifically. That's what I'm here to, talk about, obviously. But with the caveat that, as Sammy mentioned, when I was listening to this presentation for my first time, I was sitting down drawing my own circles and going, yeah, that circle of exchange is pretty bad.
Yeah.
Even for me, right?
Yeah.
So with that,
very dynamic, and they change over time. They're never stagnant or constant. It always changes. So.
Absolutely.
And maybe instead of viewing it as it's going away or leaving, it might be just that it's expanding in a different way, So instead of seeing that person every day, you're going to see them on breaks at Christmas time and in the summer.
Yeah.
So, right. Okay. But by knowing before we get there, we can be better prepared for those changes that are coming, and then that increases the chances of success. So,
absolutely. Yeah. With that, Corey, do you have any last questions, comments, anything? How can we help you kind of put this into action?
So I have a big comment on what's on the screen now.
Yeah.
As a parent with a child who's about ready to take on that higher education, this screen shot now chart that you just put up, at least from Ann, is the perfect depiction of what is best to happen. And I think 3 years ago, even, you could not have said that was Colorado or higher ed in the way you can today at 6 universities. Yeah. There's a lot of positive momentum. It's great to see and taking a part of that and moving it forward, because I feel like there's opportunities with people with different abilities right now because of it. And so a lot to be said about what you have and some of the organizations supporting it, Peak, and what you guys are doing, because I don't think that there was quite the place for people with different abilities even 3 or 4 years ago that there is today, and opportunities, and I know it's growing. So I appreciate everything you guys are doing to make that happen.
Yeah. Thanks, Corey. And yeah, and I think this is a good time to just sort of shout out, this is our first school year in Colorado that we have had 100 students enrolled in one school year, specifically within inclusive higher ed. And so as 3 years ago, we had, I'm not going to come up with the number, but significantly less than 100,
a handful,
right?
A handful.
Yeah, right. Yep. A few handfuls maybe, but yeah, I mean, as you're kind of alluding to, that the opportunities are growing, and a lot of that is because I think the willingness, going back to one of Sammy's first slides of, the social role valorization, the willingness to see people with disabilities as more of that kind of positive column, as opposed to, as Sammy unfortunately called out, oftentimes our family members and friends with disabilities are more on that kind of negative side. And I think that's starting to change, which is so inspiring and really powerful. But I think a lot of that is because they're being empowered by their parents and teachers and family, members and friends, that greater things are possible, and we want to kind of help support that and see that happen. And just back to, that's where these circles of support come into play, right? Who can we call on in these different circles to make those dreams happen?
Right. And we don't all have to be, like Temple Grandin phenomenal, right?
Right.
Right.
The average is good, right? It's important for us to continue to pursue a good life and not stop living because we've graduated from high school. So That's the most important thing. And I think, you know, N has been around for what, 10 years now, you guys?
Yep, this
Yeah,
year's
So
10.
the first year that you enrolled students, I think it was 6.
Yeah.
So from 6 to
Yep.
100,
Wow.
it's really
Yeah.
great, you know. And there's plenty of room to graduate or to grow, because I know the
Mhm.
graduating classes up here is around 1,200 in just one district. So,
Yep.
so yeah, I'm excited to see where it's going to go next. And you guys are really moving that needle to shift the paradigm. And so is Employment First, through their customized employment opportunities for people with disabilities. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you
All
so
right.
much, Sammy.
Yes,
I
anytime.
appreciate your
Yeah,
knowledge and leadership and
yeah.
inspiration and all the things you have brought today.
It's an honor and a privilege to be a part of it, what you're doing, and anytime you need, just give me a call. Like I said, you can reach out to me at Peak Parent Center. We can put you on the wait list for when we launch the project in 2025. If you're wanting to be kind of walked through the process over time. And I'm available for, you know, personal phone calls as well in the meantime. So